What's going on for you? How could I help?
Okay, I obviously would like to do well on the LSAT. I don't really have a particular goal score because I haven't selected a school yet. The thing I think I need help with most right now is I took a PT last night, and for the record, my diagnostic score was 156. And when I took the PT, it was actually right around a little bit lower than what my diagnostic score was. I'm not entirely for sure why that was. It might have been fatigue, but there was something that I had read that said that if it's not fatigue, there was something I read that I thought was interesting that basically stated if you are doing well on untimed sections or untimed practice tests, but you're not doing nearly as well on the time test, there's something that you don't know. It's not necessarily speed that's the issue, it's something else that's missing from your knowledge base. And I wanted to see what your opinion on that line of thinking was, if you subscribe to it, and what the most effective way of identifying what that unknown exactly is so that I can knock it out as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, sure. So speed comes with understanding. And obviously, if the tests were untimed, a lot of people would do a whole lot better. It's about making it more automatic, making it rote, so that you can recognize those patterns quickly when they come up rather than working through it for the first time on test day. And so I'd say it really comes down to simply deeper familiarity. There's nothing magic about this.
Okay, I understand. So how do I best identify what exactly it is that I'm unfamiliar with? Because there are, of course, some question types that I'm stronger at than others, and they don't necessarily take as much time. So I'm not quite for sure how to isolate it.
It could be that you're having particular trouble with, let's say, strengthening questions in logical reasoning, or certain types of reading comp questions, or certain types of games. But it also could be that you're getting difficult things wrong simply because they're difficult. It may not be about question types in particular. So that kind of analysis, I think, will only get you so far.
I understand. Okay. And with presently, I'm going on month 3 of the 6-month study plan. So I took the practice test a little bit out of scope of the plan, because the plan doesn't really call for a practice test just yet, at least not a full test. But I was itching for some sort of way to measure my progress, because there were instances to where I was, just for time sections, I was scoring very well between -1 and -3 on a given section. And then all of a sudden, it consistently dropped back down to an average of about 6 questions missed on a section. So I'm not entirely for sure how to gauge whether or not I'm actually making true progress versus something that's a fluke. Yeah.
So I hold off on full-length timed exams until you've covered the basics of each section. If you want to measure yourself prior to that, I have that built in too with individual timed sections. So after you've covered the basics of games, you can do a timed game section. Same goes for logical reasoning. But I wouldn't see a reason to do a full-length exam covering areas that you haven't yet worked on the foundation for.
I see. That makes sense. Because measuring the sections for which I had built the foundation on, as opposed, which is almost 2 out of 3. I believe I'm almost done with LR and about ready to move on to reading comp. So that makes perfect sense. But yeah, my goal is to just do as best I can on the test. I was a little bit bummed out by the PT, even though it was a bit out of scope. So what I'll do in the future, if I feel the need to check progress, I'll go to an older PT and do a timed section there. I think that's really all that I have.
Sure. Well, that's fine. That's fine. Listen, I've got a question for you though, which is, what would be the point of doing a timed exam in an area that you haven't covered yet relative to doing individual timed sections? Like, what are you going to get from a full exam that you wouldn't get from the timed sections?
The variable that I identified that existed within a full-time practice test versus just doing a particular section, and it really depends on what the ordering of the full-length practice test is endurance. But I see a valid point in waiting for endurance, which can actually mask my true mastery of the section, as opposed to if I just took the section. So I guess I don't really need to worry too much about the endurance factor presently, like in accordance with your plan, until I've got everything else down. I think most of the motivation for me to have taken that test as opposed to a section is that I wanted to see, because I felt after 2 months I learned a lot, I wanted to see that manifest in some way, and the most accurate manifestation of how much I had improved my baseline would have been a full practice test, which hasn't really worked for my detriment in the sense of an emotional sense that I felt that I feel super discouraged, and now I'm just blathering through logical reasoning. Well, it's wrong because it's wrong. But yeah, I'd say that's the main reason why I decided to take the practice test.
That's pretty reasonable. I get that. I get that a lot. And there's a couple of ways you could handle that. But first, just a point I want to make, which is that 2020 is unique in that endurance may not matter as much. If the remaining exams this year are all flex, as I suspect they might be, then you're only doing 3 sections. So assuming that is what's going to happen, which may or may not happen, you could do 3 timed sections, but don't make one of them reading comp if you haven't covered reading comp yet. You could do logical reasoning games, another logical reasoning to simulate the endurance, even if that ratio of sections is not what you'll experience on test day. And then if you want to do a 5-section sitting, you could do logical reasoning alternating with games. So LR, games, LR, games, LR. I'm just getting creative here. You can make up whatever you want until you've done reading comp. You could work through the reading comp foundation videos in my course. They're pretty bite-sized. It wouldn't take you that long since there's less to cover from a foundational perspective on reading comp than on the other sections. Just devote yourself to that for a week or so, and then you can feel free to add timed reading comp into the mix with even a full-length exam.
I see. I understand. I thought of something else that I'd like to ask you about. I had a clear LSAT score goal that I had in mind going into this, primarily because I knew the school that I wanted to attend, of course, with Harvard. Why not shoot high? And there was a article that was released recently that I know for a fact you're familiar with, that led me to question whether or not that was really the right school for me and where I wanted to go. So since I don't have a clear school in mind, I don't know exactly what I want to score in the LSAT. And I know that's more of a matter of like personal goals, what you think you want to be, and all of that, and perhaps maybe a little bit outside the scope of the LSAT. But because I'm tethering not necessarily tethering, but I'm in some way tying my score as a point of comparison for what school I want to go to in order to set a goal. How do I go about, or do you have or know of any resources for helping decide to what school an individual wants to go?
Sure. Yeah, I'll attack this on 2 levels. One is the specific, one is the general. So the specific, I would say there's a myriad of factors you can consider when you're deciding where you want to apply. You can consider geography, you can consider rankings, you can consider scholarship, employment outcomes, particular areas that they specialize in, like clinics and certain programs they might offer. So part of it depends on simply where you want to live and what specifically you want to do with a law degree. And I have plenty of class recordings inside the course you have access to covering these sorts of things. I also have a class coming up next week focused specifically on this. For a bit, we'll have a discussion with a law professor who's spent some time studying this, and we'll discuss the law school selection aspect of this. So you can consider all those details. But then on the general side of things, I'll think about simply, why not aim for a 180? Aim for the highest LSAT score possible, because that will open the maximum number of doors for you. And then you'll have your pick of the litter in terms of whether you want to go to a higher ranked school with less money or a lower ranked school with more money. But either way, you end up with the maximal number of options. And you can simply narrow by geography. Most people have some geographic preference about where they want to live. And then, of course, if law school's online, then that becomes somewhat irrelevant, and you can go simply based on the other factors that you like about a school.
Okay, I understand that. The only reason why, well, I won't say the only reason, but the primary reason why it was somewhat important to me to find a goal is I intend to take a test in November, receive the results in early December. So my decision or timing for the decision of whether or not I want to retake the LSAT is somewhat limited, which is why I was curious about how to identify what school and to know, of course, what their median LSAT is. What you say absolutely makes sense in continuing to strive for a 180, and I don't suppose I'll really have an answer until in the future as far as what school I want to go to, what score I'm going to get, what their median LSAT is. And I haven't even started personal statements or anything like that. So it just seems like a lot to kind of manage with the LSAT as in particular, because I really don't know anything about schools and all that.
I do have one closing comment for you here, and that relates to the school selection question. So the LSAT score is, of course, the most important factor. The personal statement you can worry about later. I got the sense you're kind of feeling like there's a lot on your plate here to juggle and consider. Pick one thing at a time and focus on it, given that LSAT's most important. Start there. When it comes to school selection, you want to go to the best ranked school that offers the most scholarship money. And there's a trade-off there, because higher ranked offers less scholarship money, lower ranked offers more scholarship money. So I want to encourage you to think not about the US News rankings, because I think they're really, they're a detriment to the system, or worse. I would think instead about the best employment outcomes,
right,
merged or factored in with scholarship money. Better employment outcomes tend to offer less scholarship money because they have more to offer you and don't need to give you the scholarship money. Schools with poorer employment outcomes will tend to offer more scholarship money because they're leaving it more to you to make your way in the world. And so a higher LSAT score, higher GPA, better application will raise your stance in their eyes so that you have better options to choose from.
Certainly. It's unfortunate. One of the things I would like to do is to get a federal judicial clerkship. Fortunately, those are often tied to those top schools. It's not make or break for me, but it's something that I think I would really like to do. In regard to scholarship money, I'm pretty blessed to not really have to worry about that because I have the GI Bill, which I can apply with the Yellow Ribbon program, so that's not too much of an issue for me. So with the scholarship being like the most common thing I hear about, or rather being one of the biggest factors in deciding a law school, since that isn't necessarily pertinent to me, I was struggling with like, okay, so what should I consider in a law school? Because right now, and especially with COVID and my financial situation, I don't have the money to be able to go, and explore all these different schools. I suppose I could call and talk to them, but yeah, I'll figure that out. I'll do some self-reflecting and think about what I really want out of the legal profession. And maybe even, I guess, visit some lawyers here in my town, because part of that, I think, stems from the ignorance of not really knowing what different types of lawyers actually do, because the brochure version somewhat differs than what they do, especially for, as I've come to realize, for corporate law.
Right, naturally. So in that case, I would suggest if scholarships are not relevant to you, given your particular situation, then regardless, a higher LSAT score can serve you by allowing you access to better schools with better employment outcomes and perhaps more specific tracks towards the clerkship route or the academic route, if that's where you want to go. Certain schools are feeders to those programs. Others are feeders to big law. and this is just anecdotal, it's coming to mind for me right now, but I believe that UChicago and Yale Law those two schools in particular may have a more direct path towards what you're looking for rather than the big law corporate route. But of course, do your research, talk to alums. That's just what I'm guessing off the top of my head based on my general associations with those schools and those particular outcomes. But you can also go on sites like Law School Transparency, and they've crunched all the numbers. Again, that's Law School Transparency. They've crunched the numbers, and they've looked at the ABA 509 reports that talk about employment outcomes, and they can tell you what percentage were employed after graduating, and then where did they end up specifically. So I'd say that's probably your best route, and you don't need to think too much about who's offering you money, but still higher score, higher numbers will get you access to better options and more options.
Of course. Yeah, that's really good. I didn't know that there was a nexus for those kind of reports. I've just gone and had to go through each individual one. So that's an excellent resource. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. Glad to help.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I'm good now. A lot of what you said, because I understand one of the questions you tend to ask towards the end of your videos is what was the value that the individual got from it. I think the value in this one, I think for me was just the calming effect of talking to another person who understands it and is able to reassure. Because a lot of these things, I mean, you repeat these things quite often, and I know these things, but it's nice to have to be told them one-on-one, because there is definitely human touch missing during this time. So that may have facilitated some more, anxiety of feeling isolated ever more in this. So it's really good to every now and again to actually have a session like this. Not that I'll call you up every time I feel anxious about the LSAT to have my hand held, but it is something that I appreciate very much.
No, of course, James. I'm glad to help. I'm glad we connected again, and you've been a great participant in the course. I love to see your engagement, and so I'll see you in class soon.
Okay, you're having it tonight, right?
Yeah, there's one tonight. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent. I will see you then.
All right, awesome. Have a good one. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.